Welcome to the Magical Overthinkers podcast, a show for thought spiralers, exploring the subjects we can't stop overthinking about, from celebrity worship to cannibalism. If you can relate to the feeling that despite living in the information age, the world only seems to be making less sense, if you can connect to the idea that for some mysterious reason, it just feels especially hard to exist as a human in the world right now, then you're in the right place. This podcast is here to try and make some sense of the senseless. I'm your host, Amanda Montell. Today, we're overthinking about UFOs. Did any other children of the 90s grow up with those glow-in-the-dark bedroom stickers on their ceiling that were like little aliens and little feet and little peace signs? They were like these very retro yet futuristic-looking images. I was obsessed with those. I think ever since then, I have really gravitated toward sort of old school depictions of what the future might look like, sort of googie design aesthetics, Barbarella core. Am I making sense? The 90s was actually quite the time for UFO lore. It was a decade defined by shows like The X-Files and Fox's Alien Autopsy hoax. It was a decade when people were really just starting to grasp digital technology for the first time, but before widespread internet and smartphones, not everybody had access to digital technology, so it carried a certain mystique for a lot of us. Interest surrounding UFOs tends to spike when life here on Earth doesn't feel so good. There was another big UFO moment during the pandemic, which was a super apocalyptic time of fierce uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen on Earth. And what do people do when Earth feels unsafe, unpredictable? We look to the sky. Because even the most expert astrophysicists don't have definitive answers about extraterrestrial life, thinking about aliens perfectly lends itself to so many forms of magical overthinking. Paranoia, wonder, and then at an extreme, religious ideology. But I think when it comes to overthinking about UFOs, it really started for me in 2021 when the United States government declassified all of these documents, basically revealing that the American government had been keeping all of these UFO sightings a secret for decades. There was one 60 Minutes episode about this that for a whole week had the entire United States in a chokehold. No matter what your politics, no matter your hobbies, everybody seemed obsessed with UFOs that week. We were still in a lockdown period. We were struggling with the present here on our home planet. And this news, however frightening, really offered a chance for us to think about something much bigger than our earthly problems. And I have been overthinking about UFOs and aliens and what they might look like and why they haven't arrived here yet ever since then. I actually wrote about that 2021 UFO story in my book, The Age of Magical Overthinking, in the context of a cognitive bias called the recency illusion, or our tendency to think that something is new and thus urgent and worthy of panic just because it's new to you. Before I introduce my interviewee today, and I can't wait for you to meet her, I'd actually love to read to you a very short 5-minute excerpt from that chapter. It's chapter 6 of the book, and it's called Time to Spiral, A Note on the Recency Illusion. For a brief but invigorating flash, I think the aliens really might nuke us once and for all. It's an uncharacteristically sticky evening in Los Angeles, the kind of dense, marshy air on which it's easy to project some kind of sinister meaning, when, hovering like twin flying saucers over the insomniac glow of my laptop screen, the love of my life and I hold our breath as a former Army intelligence officer warns America that, yes, UFOs are real, and yes, they could come for us any day now. The date is May 16th, 2021, and while Casey and I are situated cozily at home, home may not belong to us for much longer. Or so says the latest upload to 60 Minutes YouTube channel. We have tackled many strange stories on 60 Minutes, but perhaps none like this, opens a mustached CBS correspondent, his telejournalist's lilt dilating the gravity in the room. It's the story of the U.S. government's grudging acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, more commonly known as UFOs. Eyes wide as Saturn's rings, Casey and I ensconce ourselves on the couch in the dark as the correspondent squints at his panel of first-hand UAP witnesses, a handful of ex-Navy pilots and Air Force officers scanning for delusion. One foggy-eyed former lieutenant with a shaved scalp recounts a fleet of mysterious hovercrafts whirring at inexplicable speeds through both air and water off the coast of Virginia, quote, every day for at least the past couple of years. The correspondent interrupts. Wait a minute. Every day for a couple of years? Resigned, the lieutenant nods. On a loop, 60 Minutes replays the same black and white video clips captured grainily by infrared military cameras. A fuzzy charcoal fleck glides across the frame like an animatronic housefly. An iridescent isosceles slips through the atmosphere, flickering like a lighthouse. Or a tracking device? Some of this footage is decades old, but it's making airwaves now thanks to a congressional order that the Pentagon released the unclassified UAP documents they've apparently been hiding since the 1980s. Starting next month, the report will be made available for anyone to peruse online as conveniently as a Reddit thread. These UAP are now officially considered a national security risk, the ex-CIA chap tells CBS, and it's high time the public knew. Casey, my partner, and I watch a lot of space videos together. Little internet films about Fmes Paradox, or terraforming the moon, or how the largest galaxy supercluster in the observable universe compares in size to the smallest quark. We've been together for 5 years, but have known each other since childhood, an age when aliens, dinosaurs, and the Tooth Fairy all seemed equally plausible. Casey and I went to performing arts school together in Baltimore, and reconnected a decade later in LA. He came here to compose music for movies and video games. And podcasts. I've overheard him in the other room scoring sci-fi scenes, not unlike the one we're watching now. Learning about black holes and light years feels like therapy to us. Two sensitive teenagers turned overthinking adults who need regular reminders of how puny we are. Sometimes I wonder if that's why people in LA can be so self-centered. The narcissism isn't innate. There's just too much light pollution to see the stars. That a swarm of technologically hyper-advanced extraterrestrials had arrived to surveil and possibly torch our humble planet was hardly the most dystopian concern the American news media assigned our frayed little nervous systems in 2021, but it was up there. Amid the global pandemic, the ever-escalating climate crisis, and famines the world over, there was already so much to pay attention to. Too many Armageddons for our sweet Stone Age amygdalas to process. But there was something special about the UFO story's effect on the modern mind. For that 1 week in May, everyone I knew clung to it like lint to a warm sock. An alien attack. It was such a refreshingly unifying fear. Politics felt outright petty in comparison. You have so many enemies on Earth until conflicts turn intergalactic. Confronted with an army of hypersonic hovercrafts, even Mitch McConnell starts to look like a quasi-friendly face. A celestial invasion also felt just plain whimsical. Unlike the era's other existential perils, starvation, disease, at least it lent itself to imagination. What did the aliens look like? What part of the universe had they come from? Were they here to study us? Or save us? Or were we comparatively so primitive that after scanning our cute cerulean sphere, they quickly determined there was no intelligent life to speak of and were planning any day now to zap our resources, like chopping down a tree for the scrap wood with little pity for its squirrel tenants, and continue on their merry way? Sensible or not, I welcomed this space-themed version of doom. Finally, I thought, a cataclysm we can all agree to fixate on for a while. That was wishful thinking, of course. And to my disenchantment, by the following week, no one cared about UAP anymore. Headlines had moved on to supply chain shortages and a TikTok-famous sheepadoodle named Bunny, and so had the clicks and ad dollars. But for what felt like a longer than average stretch of time, our collective attention was tethered to the stars. Well, thank you for listening, and with that, I would love to introduce my very special expert guest of the day, who's here to at least help me parse through my overthinking about UFOs and aliens and space and the existential implications of it all. Her name is Dr. Moiya McTier, and she is one of my favorite people in the observable universe. Dr. McTier is an astrophysicist and a folklorist. Quoting her website, McTier is a queer Black girl from rural Pennsylvania with 4 Ivy League degrees in astrophysics and folklore. Her work as a science communicator sits at the intersection of science and storytelling, fact and fiction, complex concepts, and chaotic creativity. A dream to interview. Dr. McTier is the author of The Milky Way, an autobiography of our galaxy, and host of a few podcasts and web shows, including Pale Blue Pod and Fate and Fabled. She is also kind and cool, and I can't wait for you to hear this conversation where I got to overthink with Dr. Moiya McTier about UFOs. Can you introduce yourself and your work to our listeners?
I would love to. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Moiya McTier, and I work full-time these days as a science communicator. So it is my goal and mission to help people understand the world around us better through science. I use humor. I use storytelling. I just like that intersection a whole lot. So I do podcasts and books and talks and things.
Oh, that is so cool. Could you actually tell a little bit about your background and your story? Because it's so sparkly and inspiring. It's cosmic, if you will.
Like my shirt, yes. Let's start at the beginning. I grew up in a log cabin in the middle of the woods without running water or heat or TV. And then I became a nerd because I thought that was the best way to handle the loneliness. I worked really hard. I was very fortunate. I got into Harvard where I started studying both astrophysics and folklore and mythology. I wrote a science fiction novel for my senior thesis there that was set on a real exoplanet and was based on some work I did in Hawaii around the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. And from there, I decided to be strategic and get a PhD in astrophysics. It seemed like the more reasonable thing to do job-wise. And along the PhD journey, I realized I do not like doing research. I'm much happier when I get to talk to people about science. So in my second year of 5, I hard pivoted and I started working on my science communication, started building up clients and a business, and now I'm full-time.
I love how you chose your own adventure. I love your story, and it's so brilliant, the idea of like taking all this scholarship that you've done and using it to paint a portrait of our world for people who otherwise might not understand a graph or a chart.
Because why should they if they haven't been trained to? Like, those things aren't immediately obvious.
Yeah. Okay. This is a podcast for overthinkers. So my first question for you is, what is an irrational thought spiral that's currently living rent-free in your head?
Oh, no. Oh, no. Let's get personal. I am thinking a lot about like romantic relationships and whether or not I am actually in a good place to have one. I got out of a really long-term relationship about a year ago, and a few months ago I thought I'm ready to like fall in love again, and then I tried it and I don't know if I am. So that is spiraling through my head a lot.
That's so human. And it's so hard to know. Like, that's just such an instinctive process to figure out. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe you'll fall in love with an alien.
I wouldn't be opposed. I have publicly stated aliens that I find attractive.
Who are the hottest aliens, you think?
Well, so many of them are humanoid. So like they're the ones who just look like hot humans. But I think the alien species that surprises the most people is that I actually find the Wraith from Stargate pretty hot.
Okay, hot take. Very hot take.
Very hot take. Something about the teeth. I don't know. I like it.
I'm going to have to think about my alien crush. I can say my non-human crush is probably the water monster in Shape of Water.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Hot. So I was quite taken with the sky as a young person. I didn't pursue that formally, but my partner Casey and I, our favorite thing in this world to do is watch space videos on YouTube together. Like Kurtzgesagt. Are you familiar with that channel? And like a good Vox Explained video about space. We love those. But I do feel like in general, humans have always sort of looked up at the sky to figure out why we're here and if anyone else is out there. But I'm curious if we've always believed in life on other planets as opposed to like just looking up and being like, oh, God is up there and we're the only ones here. I guess this is a big question to start us off, but could you sort of summarize a brief cultural history of UFOs? Like, when did UFOs become a thing to us? And at different points in history, what did our theories about UFOs say about our culture at the time?
Yeah, it's a long history, but also a very short history, like much shorter than you might think it is, because we have been fascinated with the night sky as a species for thousands of years. We've told stories about it, we've navigated by it, we've used it to keep time, and the cultures that did that all had different stories. Some of them imagined creatures that lived out among the stars, but some of them thought the stars were just like holes in a blanket between us and a realm of fire. So it really was that varied. And for a long time, we didn't know that there were other planets. The ancient Babylonians, they called the planets in our solar system wandering stars. They saw that they moved differently than the distant fixed stars, is what they called them. The Greeks gave those the word planet because wandering stars then translated to planeton in Greek. And now we have the word planet. But we didn't think of them as worlds similar to Earth until probably the 1700s.
Okay, like Enlightenment vibes?
Yeah, definitely Enlightenment vibes. And then there were people, once we realized, oh, those are planets and they have surfaces and like there are other Earths out there, then people started imagining aliens. There was this astronomer in the 1800s, I think, his name was Percival Lowell. He was obsessed. He has an observatory named after him now. He was convinced that there were aliens on Mars. Like, he was willing to stake his career on this claim. And other people kind of got swept up in that. But it's not until the 1950s, 1960s that you see kind of the modern UFO craze. Science and science fiction often play together. So science fiction writers had aliens in their stories in the 1900s, like early. But there was this one event around the 1950s, this couple, Barney and Betty Hill, they spread this story of them getting abducted by aliens. And it got caught up in the news. And around the same time, there was a military base that reported seeing some strange phenomenon in the sky. And those two things together created a national media frenzy, let's say. Yeah. And I think that's where the modern UFO craze started, with these like little green or gray men.
Yes. Got it. But let me go back. I know that a bunch of listeners have this question too. What is the latest accepted theory about life on other planets in the astrophysics community?
Yes. I studied planets outside of our solar system. So like my core colleagues, they were thinking about this all the time. And every responsible, well-regarded astrophysicist I know believes that aliens have not visited us, believes that we have not found evidence of alien life in the universe, but they are all kind of optimistic that there is life out there. We know, based on studying planets, that the conditions for life are pretty common. The building blocks like the carbons and the oxygens and the nitrogens, we know they're common. We know water is pretty common in the universe. Even the conditions that might jumpstart life should be pretty common, like electricity or some type of radiation, but we don't think it's come here.
Good to know. Very glad to know. Okay, so I've found that in my reporting on cults and delusion in general, that whenever there are major technological shifts, those are often used to provide a new set of rituals and iconography for old belief systems. So like in the 1960s, there was the space race, and in the 1990s, there was a sort of explosion because of the dot-com boom.
Yeah.
So that's why there was so much UFO fascination and UFO cults started to emerge and stuff like that. So I am definitely into UFOs now in a way that I don't feel like makes me a weirdo. But I was wondering if you could talk about what the current UFO craze says about our culture right now in a way that's different from what it said about us in the past.
Yeah, there has been a lot of conversation lately about, is our government hiding proof of UFOs? I'd say the biggest difference between the craze around UFOs now and what we saw in the 60s and 70s is this added element of distrust with the government now. Like the talk around UFOs in the 60s and 70s, it felt less like the government is lying to us, and they have been for a long time, and more like, oh, none of us know what's out there and we are all discovering it at the same time. And now there's an us versus them feel to it that wasn't always there.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, as governments are doing many violent things, I think that might infuse the general culture with this sense of paranoia that aliens might come to do similarly violent things, or the opposite, which is the fantasy of someone coming down from above and taking us all away from here. So you sometimes consult on movies about space. What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions about UFOs and aliens perpetuated by Hollywood? And do you think that those misconceptions are harmful in any way?
Oh, yes. Short answer, yes. I am a fictional world builder professionally. Like, I love imagining life on other worlds and how it would realistically evolve under those conditions. And my biggest pet peeve with science fiction, it has been for years that I've been consuming fiction and like the decades that people have been making science fiction, there are so many humanoid aliens.
Yes. Oh my God, we anthropomorphize the shit out of like everything in this universe.
Yes. And I understand the practical reasons for that. It's more cost efficient to have humanoid aliens so you don't have all these prosthetics. It's better for an audience in terms of relatability. Like, they're more likely to empathize with an alien character that looks kind of like them.
Totally.
But scientifically, I think it gives people the wrong impression that we are kind of like a default form, or if not a default form, an ultimate form. I think there are a lot of humans who think that evolution led to us because this is the right way to be. And evolution just got us here because it's what worked in our environment.
Right.
On a different planet, evolution would take a different path. And I wish I could see more wacky aliens represented in science fiction.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, what did you think about the aliens in Arrival?
I loved the aliens in Arrival.
Me too.
Yeah, it's great. Give them a weird concept of time. Give them a weird language. Give them a weird body shape. Although, like, that kind of cephalopod body shape is what science fiction writers often do when they're trying to deviate from the human shape.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like the two species we can conceive of
Yeah.
are like human or octopus.
Or sometimes crab.
Or sometimes crab.
But those are the three basic shapes. And I think it's harmful to give people the idea that we're the default state, because then they imagine human motivation driving alien species. And that's why they think the aliens are coming here. The aliens are going to hurt us. The aliens are going to like manipulate us in some way, because that's what humans do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we've always projected our intentions, our worldview, our reality onto other beings. Like, it is mind-blowing to me that other species on this planet perceive time differently.
Yes.
You know? Like bees.
Other cultures.
Yeah, literally other cultures. Yes, you're so right. Because like there are some cultures that write time as going from up to down according to their writing system. Like all of that stuff influences our perceptions, not to mention like different animals' circadian rhythms. Like there's not even ground truth in terms of time perception on this planet, much less in the universe. What do you think is the downside of that? Like when we make those assumptions, does it inhibit our ability to learn? Does it make us more self-focused? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the self-focus point is a big one. It rounds our perception back on us. And I think that we already pay too much attention to ourselves. But another way that this is harmful is that I think it feeds into the kind of dangerous conspiracy thinking. If you are projecting kind of the worst aspects of humanity onto this other species and you're imagining this advanced technology and advanced biology, maybe if they're bigger and stronger than us, because there's so much we don't know about alien species, we have the potential to project the scariest things onto them, and we too often do.
Totally. Yeah. It sounds like another downside to me is this paranoia.
Yeah.
Because like we know ourselves at our worst. So we figure like if something inexplicable is happening, we jump to a worst case scenario as maybe a self-protective mechanism. So there's a chapter in my new book where I actually talk about the paranoia surrounding those declassified documents, because I couldn't help but notice how curious it was that everybody started panicking about aliens being a threat to us based on documentation that was actually like 30 or 40 years old.
Yeah.
It was really fascinating to me because I was like, this information is not new. It's just new to us. And we're mistaking our access to it as cause for panic.
Yes.
I actually want to continue talking about that moment in history because I remember when that story came out, people stopped using the term UFOs, which made me a little sad. They started using UAP or unidentified aerial phenomena. And I'm wondering if you know why that is. Like, was it actually more accurate or was it just a rebranding exercise?
It was a rebrand.
I knew it!
They have since adapted the UAP acronym, and now it's Unidentified Aerial and Aquatic Phenomenon.
Okay.
So they've like widened the scope to make it slightly more accurate. But really, it means the same thing. It's stuff floating in the sky or moving in water that we can't identify.
So there was no reason to rename them other than the illusion that this was like an updated, more technical term.
Yeah, and I think there are legitimate reasons for wanting a more technical, updated term, because UFO does carry a lot of weight and it's attached to a lot of these conspiracy theories. And I know that as an astronomer, I've often felt really hesitant to discuss UFOs because people have a really strong association with it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So as an adult, I think another one of the pieces of media that got me really interested in life on other planets was this YouTube channel called Kurzgesagt, which has these really fun animated videos that are sometimes about ridiculous things like, what if we blew up the moon? But sometimes they're about much more cerebral and thought-provoking things like Fmes Paradox. So before I ask my next question, could you explain what Fmes Paradox is?
Yeah, it's this concept, this kind of thought experiment started by Enrico Fermi. He's this Italian-American physicist in the 1950s. And kind of at lunch with his colleagues, he's thinking about the number of stars out there and how many of those stars have planets. And he's wondering, based on how many stars we know there are, why don't we see aliens? Like, where are they? Why haven't we detected them yet? So that's what the Fermi's Paradox is, because we have not detected aliens, but many people believe that they're out there. So why haven't we found them?
So what's the deal?
What's the deal? Where are the aliens at, bro?
So what is the deal?
There are so many different potential solutions to the Fermi paradox. Some say that there's this great bully alien species out there that's going out and culling anyone who gets too technologically advanced. Some say that as a species advances technologically, eventually they reach a point where they self-destruct. And others say that there are aliens out there, but space is just too big and it takes time for these signals to travel. I could go on and on about these different potential solutions. Personally, I think that the most appealing solution to the Fermi paradox is to kind of not approach it as a paradox at all. Like, I don't think it's weird that we haven't found aliens. I guess because I believe that space is just really big.
Yeah.
We've only had the ability to detect and emit electromagnetic signals, like light waves, for 100 years, if that. There's no guarantee that aliens would communicate or power with electromagnetic energy anyway. And so I am not at all concerned by the Fermi paradox, because I think the fact we haven't found them doesn't say anything about whether or not they're there.
Yeah, again, so many of those solutions to the paradox involve violence.
Yes.
They're like so pessimistic.
Thank you.
It's like, what if the universe is just like expanding really, really fast, and like just because we're here doesn't mean that we should be everywhere? That's maybe not how it works.
Yeah, there's this assumption that aliens, if they got advanced enough to travel through space, would obviously want to colonize and control every other part of the galaxy. Like, that's always the assumption that people go to when they're discussing things like the Fermi paradox.
Yeah.
And I'm like, humans haven't even always done that.
Uh-huh.
The loud humans in recent history, they've done that, but look at indigenous cultures. Look at cultures around the world who understood how to interact with their environment in a non-extractive and non-overconsumptive way. Why can't aliens be like that?
Totally. It's making a lot of assumptions that aliens are like the worst of the human species. Greedy, expansionist, you know. What if they're peaceful? What if they're just not interested? What if they're chilling? What if they're like monks and they're just like vibing?
What if they're monks? They're scholars. They could have zero interest in us. One hypothesis for the Fermi paradox that I really like is the idea that an advanced society would realize that expanding their civilization is just inefficient.
Yeah, not worth it.
Not worth it. You get spread out enough and you can't communicate with each other. You can't really share your resources effectively. It's like the Roman Empire all over. You spread out your resource management.
Aliens are our Roman Empire.
You heard it here first.
See, this is what I love about thinking about aliens, because it's just fun to fantasize without becoming too attached to those fantasies such that you're not open to anything else.
Look, there are dragon aliens. Like, that's the thing. The universe is so big.
That's kind of what dinosaurs were.
Yeah, a pterodactyl, you're right, it's a dragon.
Yeah.
biologically speaking. And why can't that happen on other planets?
That's cool. And dinosaurs never wanted to make contact with anyone else.
No, they just wanted to eat and frolic.
I actually want to keep talking about that because I like thinking about aliens because it inspires wonder and imaginative thought, even if that comes with a little paranoia at times or ideas that don't fully check out according to astrophysicists. And I'm wondering, what would you say are the potential benefits of entertaining ideas of UFOs?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be skeptical of the status quo because we know that some of our science is wrong now because that's how science works. It gets better over time.
Yeah.
So thinking about aliens, I think flexes or strengthens those skeptical muscles, which is great. Also, the people who really believe in aliens or really want there to be aliens, they are keeping an open mind, which is another very important skill. You have to be open to new information coming in, and you have to know how to absorb that information into your current worldview. So I think those are the benefits. Also, the interdisciplinary thinking required to actually realistically imagine what an alien species might be like, that's really powerful.
Ooh, I like that. But then how do we prevent ourselves from spinning out into paranoid thinking that can border on really destructive conspiracism?
Your skepticism can only go so far, and I think it's a matter of practicing finding the stopping point. I find my stopping point when what I am imagining butts up against what I know to be true or what I have seen to be true with evidence and data. I am fortunate that I've been exposed to more evidence and data than the average person. That's what education has given me. So for the people out there who don't have that education, find people who do. Find people like me and like other science communicators who you trust to have balanced takes on things and who you trust to tell you the truth. I will always tell you the truth as I understand it. And so there are people like me out there who can help you with the same thing.
I would love to hear your recommendations for like other science communicators that other people can follow. Because I find whenever I start to feel really hopeless or really fearful about the future or start really thought spiraling about, I don't know, anything from aliens to nuclear warfare, whenever I speak to scholars, experts, academics, I find myself feeling so soothed because I think some people think that learning more is intimidating or is going to be boring. But I've found that most of the academics that I've spoken to about mental health in society right now or language change, whatever discipline it is, they're so optimistic about the future and where science is going. And I think that optimism is driven by their curiosity rather than their fear. And so I really love hearing from people like you because at the end of the day, it makes me feel more hopeful than paranoid. So who are some other science communicators that you recommend people pay attention to?
I'll try to limit it to astronomy. Serafina Nance is fantastic. Dakota Tyler is doing great work out in LA. There are organizations that are really great. I want to shout out Astrobytes. They take academic articles and rewrite them into words that college students can understand. It's like they're aimed at people who have not trained in this.
Cool.
And that's great too, because I don't want you to come away from listening to this thinking that you should just rely on other people. Like also read yourself from reputable sources. So there's a little bit of media skills that are required there to figure out like what is a good source of information versus not. So Astrobytes is a great source of information. Mark Popenchak is also doing great stuff. Jackie Faraday, Emily Rice. Astro on Tap, if you live in a city that has an astronomy on tap outlet, go to talks by astronomers who are actively trying to connect with people in informal education settings.
Ooh, that sounds like a fun, nerdy date night idea. I love that. All right. I have one more question from me, and then I'm going to beset you with thought spirals from the Magical Overthinkers Club. My final question, though, is how do scientists and the government communicate with each other about aliens and UFOs?
There are protocols in place for what astronomers should do if they happen to detect alien life first. They get their colleagues around the world to confirm that it's a real detection. They contact like national security, and there's supposed to be some sort of like national messenger system that alerts us to the existence of aliens, like if it goes through that channel. There's a lot of interaction between astronomers and the government. We're funded by a lot of government agencies 1950s. There's a very strong connection between the Defense Department and the military-industrial complex and astronomy. I think that's how a lot of our research gets funded. And so there are connections. They're talking to each other.
I see. I do want to ask about the communication style, though. How do you think communication to the public about UFOs could be improved upon? I mean, I just think about those congressional hearings from last year, the 2023 hearings, when the media really glommed onto this idea that non-human alien material had been stumbled upon, and that caused quite the freak out. So I'm hoping you could shed some wisdom on all of this.
It's a tricky balance to reach, but we would want it to have the right balance of informative and like soothing. We would want it to somehow convey the data that we're taking in. Like, here is the information we have available, and here are our conclusions. And our conclusions are that there's no definitive evidence for alien contact with Earthlings.
But that doesn't make for a viral headline.
It doesn't make for a viral headline. And the way that the government is trying to get to the bottom of this issue with the hearings from last summer, the people asking those questions don't know.
Right.
And the people answering the questions can't reveal everything. And so what we can see of the process is this weird blend of opaque where the information is and transparent where there's not enough information.
That makes so much sense. And then combined with all the mistrust of the government and our inherently paranoid minds as human beings who are like trying to clock threats wherever we turn, it only makes sense that there would be this like UFO hullabaloo where there needn't be.
Yeah. So they made those hearings public. They put them on C-SPAN or whatever. But how many people were going to watch a 2-hour and 18-minute congressional hearing? I did, but not many people are.
Yeah.
And you can't pull like sound bites from that conversation because it's so nuanced and it's so complex. So I think we need to have clearer messaging that, yes, put that on display, but also have very clear key points afterwards.
Totally.
You know, like here is what was actually said so that there's no room for misinterpretation.
Yeah. It's hard for people who know everything to distill what they know into bullet points like that.
What I would have loved out of those like hearings was at least one point with a quote from one of the testifiers saying that like he never said aliens. He never said aliens. The only thing he said was non-human biological remains. And if people had seen that instead of the summaries which said like, oh, he said there were like extraterrestrial stuff, no.
So I want to move on to some thought spirals from the magical overthinkers who listen to the show. The first one actually comes from my partner, Casey, who thinks that the UAP are real and that aliens have just gotten here because they've noticed we're on the brink of a major technological shift and they don't want us to fuck it up. Another listener similarly said that they think the aliens are arriving because they think we're too close to nuclear warfare and they want to prevent it because of their own experience with that. And that's why there are so many sightings near military bases. Thoughts on such theories?
Yes. I'll address the military bases thing first. I think that the reason we see a lot of sightings around military bases is because military bases have secret things that fly that they don't tell us about. So I fully believe that people are seeing unidentified flying things, but I don't think those are alien made.
Yeah, they might be like Russian made.
Right.
Or whatever.
Or whatever. Like, our government is making very cool technological stuff all the time. Like, they don't release it for decades after they actually develop it.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that people would see weird things around those points.
Also, people who work in the military's job is to look out for shit.
Yeah.
You know, like they have like so many radars and doodads and squeedle paps. I don't know what their machines are called, but they have shit like infrared shit literally geared toward identifying things that we civilians don't have.
Yes. And you're right. The military, they're good at observing stuff. And so to answer the earlier question about the aliens coming here now, there is this one solution to the Fmes Paradox that says some alien species are kind of monitoring the whole galaxy and trying to keep everyone at an evenly keeled technological advancement pace. So that's one potential solution, but I also think that as people see technological advancement here on Earth, they start to imagine and they start to like see it in other contexts. Mm-hmm. Look, maybe the aliens have very good cloaking technology, but unless they all have the same cloaking technology that is really good at evading particularly like the type of things we're looking for, I feel like we would have seen them.
Okay, love you, Casey, but you're probably wrong. Okay, next thought spiral. We went over this, but I think it's worth bringing up again. Why do people always assume that aliens are so similar to us when they probably are unlike us in ways we can't even imagine?
You answered your question. Yeah. They probably are unlike us. Why have a torso and 4 limbs? If you aren't on a rocky planet with a surface that you can actually touch, there's no need for walking or crawling. So they might fly. They might be gaseous blobs themselves that float through the gaseous planet's atmosphere. I don't know. There are hundreds of billions of planets in our galaxy alone. We know that most of them are not like Earth. And even if they were a rocky planet the same size, orbiting the same type of star, they would have different internal processes. They would have different resources on them. Like, there are just so many different environments, and evolution is so specialized to the environment that I don't think it's realistic to think that any of them would look like us.
Yeah. Again, like octopuses, they are on this planet right now, and they don't look anything like us.
Nothing like us. Exactly. And they, ostensibly came from the same, base DNA, right?
Yeah.
So imagine a completely different starter process.
Totally. Oh my God, gaseous blobs. Love that notion. Also, an astrophysics term that I think beautifully blends science and folklore, your two disciplines, that I love and think about all the time is the phrase the Goldilocks zone.
Oh, I love the Goldilocks zone.
It's like the space that Earth occupies. It's like when a planet has just the right temperature conditions conducive to life. They call it the Goldilocks zone. I think that's so fun and cute.
Can I blow your mind a little?
Yeah.
There's also a Goldilocks zone to the galaxy.
What does that mean?
This was my PhD research. I researched the galactic habitable zone. There are places in the galaxy where you expect to find conditions that are good for life like us. And we're looking for slightly different things. With the Goldilocks zone around stars, you're looking for temperature, so you can have liquid water. But with the galactic Goldilocks zone, you're looking for the right number of stars, the right number of heavy elements. You want to have the right shape of your orbit so that you don't come too close to any other stars. It's fun. And we are in the middle of it.
I love that for us. See, this is why I don't think, some people think it's depressing that we haven't made contact with a similar species or whatever, but I'm like, but we're so special. It means we should really be nicer to the Earth.
Yes, and each other. This is all we have.
Yeah, you're so right. It's like if we haven't found, an escape hatch, maybe we should just make the best of what we've got. It's really good. I mean, Earth is so pretty.
It's so pretty. All this water, all this sky. We have a
Listen.
magnetic field that protects us from so much stuff. You don't even know. The stuff from the sun, the stuff from the outer solar system. So good.
It's also, it blows my mind. It makes me want to fucking cry that the aurora borealis forms because of the atmosphere protecting us from solar flares.
Yeah.
It looks like theater. It looks like it's here to dazzle us, but it's here to protect us.
Yeah, 2 for the price of 1. If price of 0, it's free.
It's free. Well, making our way to Scandinavia, that's a pricey plane ticket. I'm saving up right now. Okay, here's another one. Isn't it that we can never make contact with other life because by the time they reach us, we'll be long gone?
Yeah, there is that time dependence here because the universe is really old, almost 14 billion years old as far as we know, and it's really big.
She looks great for her age.
Doesn't she? I think she's just getting better and better over time. Yeah, we could just be missing each other in time. And it also takes a lot of time for messages to travel if they're traveling on light. It takes 8 minutes for the light from our sun to reach us, which is a very short amount of time. It takes 4 years for light from the nearest star to our sun to reach us. The nearest star to us is Proxima Centauri. It's a system of 3 stars.
So that could very well be it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to assume that we are first or that we exist when others exist. We talk about how Earth is a small world. The universe is a big universe. So the coincidences that we have here of randomly bumping into someone because you're in the grocery store at the same time, that's so much less likely in the universe context.
Such a good way of putting it. Okay, next thought spiral. Why do so many cults involve UFOs and aliens? Like Heaven's Gate, Scientology. A guy named Zachariah Stitchin explained human origins with a theory about ancient astronauts. I mean, I can kind of speak to that. We touched on it earlier, but I think it's just, first of all, the great mystery of life is why we're here and what is our purpose and where are we going. And when technology is invented, it provides a fun and fresh aesthetic and new answers to those age-old questions. So with the dawn of science fiction, it only makes sense that that would inform new religions and culty groups from the 50s, 60s onward.
I agree. I mean, looking back through mythology, there are so many cultures around the world. A lot of Mesoamerican cultures like Incas and Maya. I know in Japanese religion, in ancient Egypt, the ruling family, they said that they got their power directly from one of their deities, usually their sun god. And so there was often that connection between the people who have power here, they got it because of some divine assignment. And with the Enlightenment and with religion weakening over time, especially in the West, something had to take its place. And the gods were already in the sky. And if that's where the aliens are, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to just like be the replacement.
Yeah, we look upward and outward. But then I think it's also interesting that in the age of social media, when we are so often looking down, now celebrities are our new godlike figures, spiritual authorities in a way, you know? So it's like aliens is like the best case scenario. Like I would much rather like worship a mythical alien than, you know, Charlie XCX or something.
Right.
No shade to her whatsoever. It's just, I think looking up versus looking down, this is maybe like a silly observation, but I think it does probably affect how much awe you feel or don't. And in theory, worshiping something should provoke awe, but it's hard to feel awe-inspired when you're looking down at your phone, you know? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I lament often that we seem to have lost this connection to the sky for so many reasons, for a spiritual reason, for practical reasons, for educational ones.
Here's another thought spiral from a listener. What's with people who experience a time slip and find themselves in a different position after UFO sightings? Have you heard of this?
Different position, like in a different place, like a different location?
I guess so.
Yeah. I think this is pretty common in UFO stories. People who say that they've been abducted, they wake up in a different place, or they wake up in the same place, but hours seem to have passed and they don't remember the time passing. That is very common in these stories. But I think there are other ways to explain it. I don't want to make assumptions about their lives, but drugs can also have time-altering effects, and even food, you know, like getting really sleepy after a Thanksgiving dinner because of the tryptophan in turkey, like that can make you lose a few hours.
It's not aliens, it's just food.
It's just food. It's just turkey. It's just the itis, actually. People sleepwalk. People have headaches that make them lose. I don't know. Like there are a lot of human psychological and neurological explanations that I think are simpler than an alien abduction.
Right. This is why, like, even though I don't sincerely believe in ghosts, I might as well, because I believe you do.
I believe in magic.
Okay, so same, but like it's really just I believe in the human mind's capacity to create anything. And so like if you experience a ghost, even if it's just your mind, like what's the difference at a point?
Right.
You know?
Like, even if it's just a placebo ghost, it's
the placebo is real. You could see a ghost because of the placebo effect. It might as well be real. I don't know. That argument could be taken down a slippery slope, but
that's
like
fine.
It's good enough for me.
You gotta have your snowshoes to stop you before you fall off the edge.
Ooh, snowshoes. I like that. All right, 2 more thought spirals. Someone says, I always come back to overthinking about black holes. Is it at all likely that they'll be an issue?
That's a great question. No, they're totally fine. We think that every galaxy has a supermassive black hole in its center. We found a couple that don't, and that was weird, like capital W weird. So most galaxies do. Ours is called Sagittarius A star. It's about 4 million times the mass of our sun. And it is a small black hole compared to other galaxies. Other galaxies have much bigger ones. It is very far away, 25,000 light years. It cannot influence us or touch us. There are, however, about 10 million much smaller black holes floating around our galaxy. We call these stellar mass black holes, and they form when really massive stars explode. And they are also not a problem. They are moving around the galaxy. We can't see them because they're black holes. Every once in a while, they will interact gravitationally with another star. But we live in a part of the galaxy that is so diffuse. Things are so spread apart that we really don't have to worry about that.
Chill. You know, sometimes when I feel like self-focused in a way that isn't healthy, I do like to watch black hole videos and just look at photos of black holes because it makes me feel reassuringly small.
Nice. Did you see the brand new photo that the Event Horizon telescope put out?
Hell fucking yeah, I did.
Nice.
I love that shit.
Yeah.
But a black hole will eventually swallow us whole, no?
Well, okay. Very, very, very long time from now.
It's like explaining death to a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have to worry about it right now.
Exactly. Except the scales are even more ridiculous. Black holes do not suck things in like a vacuum. That is a misconception that a lot of people hold, but they're just gravity pits. Things fall into them. They do not get sucked into them. We are far enough away from our galaxy's black hole that we're falling around it, but we're not anywhere close to falling into it. Eventually, in trillions of years, when galaxies have all combined, like all of our 50 galaxies in our little local group combine, and all of the stars have formed and died, and there's no gas left, and all of the light is gone, yeah.
But don't worry about it, kid.
But our planet will not survive that. Like, our sun is going to get us before any black hole does.
Totally. Yeah. Our mother will swallow us, yes. And that's fine. It'll happen. It's okay. How do you feel about the multiverse stuff?
I like it in theory. I really like fiction that does multiverse stuff well, but that's like physics. That's like theoretical physics.
Right.
And that requires a type of math that my brain does not like to wrap around.
Fair. Absolutely fair. All right. Last thought spiral from a magical overthinker says, we're either the dumbest or the smartest, and that's why the aliens have left us alone till now.
If it's between those two options, I'd say dumbest.
Dumbest.
Yeah. We can barely get off our own little space rock. If there are aliens out there, I gotta hope that they've figured more out than we have. But also, here's the thing. Intelligence is not a one-dimensional spectrum. And so we are very smart given the problems that we've faced in our environment. Because we've solved most of the problems it's thrown at us. Aliens would have solved their own problems, and they would have their own way of being smart.
Yeah. If we like shine theoried with aliens, we could like really do something special. If those gaseous blobs and us, if we collabed, it could be huge.
It would be a beautiful, beautiful story.
That is a sentence that like I hope anyone at all understood. Okay, amazing. My very last question for you is, what is the one thing that you think we as a society are overthinking the most about UFOs? And what is the one thing you think we're underthinking the most?
I think we are overthinking their motivations. So many of the fears that get drummed up around aliens are because we've projected our human stuff onto them. And I think that that's just a mistake. We're like getting caught up in it in our heads. And if we didn't think so hard about what they wanted, things would probably be easier for us. Maybe worse for science fiction, but easier for humanity. And the thing that we're underthinking is what they actually would be like. I think if we could devote a little more brain power to, what do they actually look like? Do they need to eat? Do they sleep? Are they conscious? Like, can they telecommunicate? Like, if we were thinking about that, I would be happier at least.
Yes, I love the idea of like an astrophysicist endorsing us to be more delulu about the
Yeah.
aliens.
Look, be speculative. Like,
Yeah.
have fun with it. Use your imagination, because that ultimately is what aliens are good for, is letting us explode in imagination.
Oh, I freaking love it. Dr. McTier, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Magical Overthinkers. If folks want to keep up with you and your science communications, where can they do that?
Thanks for having me. You can find me on all the socials at GoAstroMo. My website is moiamctier.com. And if you are open to the idea of listening to more podcasts, I host one called Exolore about fictional world building. So you can see me with expert guests imagining those realistic aliens. And if you want to learn more about space without the speculative bit, I host a podcast called Pale Blue Pod. It's an astronomy podcast for people who are overwhelmed by the universe but still want to be its friend.
So cool. Love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Magical Overthinkers. Now is the part of the episode where I share a little tidbit of evidence-based advice for how we overthinkers can get out of our own heads this week. This week's tidbit has to do with a little feeling called awe. I have been really interested in awe as an emotion, as a sort of curative practice for thought spirals. And in my new book, I included a tiny bit of research from the social scientist Dr. Keltner. He's a UC Berkeley psychology professor and the author of a book called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. I read a paper that Dr. Keltner co-authored about awe, and there was a really funny moment where he and his co-authors were defining what awe means, and part of their definition painted a picture of someone standing relaxed with their head tilted slightly upward, jaw slightly dropped, saying the word wow or whoa. Awe, which is a different feeling from joy or relaxation, is the kind of humbling wonder associated with activities like immersion in nature or live music or collective dance, spiritual rituals, or psychedelics. According to Dr. Keltner, it's the particular emotion that arises when we encounter vast mysteries that we don't understand. Even in small doses, awe is found to move us to feel less impatient, less self-focused, more generous, and eager to spend time on experiences over possessions. There was one study published by Psychological Science, I'll link it in our show notes, which found that simply looking at nature moves us to be less materialistic. Participants in this one study who'd just taken in a wondrous outdoor view were more likely than the control group to report that they'd rather spend $50 on a Broadway show ticket than a nice wristwatch. I don't know how in this economy you could buy either one of those things with $50, but that is what the study found. During times in my life when I've felt extremely overwhelmed and in my head, prioritizing those types of experiences that incite awe has been really helpful to me. So whenever you can prioritize an experience of awe, I think that can help with the thought spirals. Thank you, listeners, so much again for being here. And until the next thought spiral, remember, think it over. Just don't overthink it. Magical Overthinkers was created and hosted by Amanda Montell and edited by Jordan Moore of The Pod Cabin. Our theme music is by Casey Kolb. Thank you to our magical coordinator, Katie Epperson, producer, Rebecca Swan, and Network Studio 71. Be sure to follow the pod on Instagram at Magical Overthinkers. We're also on YouTube, link in show notes, and ad-free episodes as well as behind-the-scenes extras are available on the Magical Overthinkers Substack at amandamontell.substack.com.